Before the divorce papers hit my inbox, I was lying on a cot in a crumbling outpost overseas, dust in my throat, gun by my side, counting the days until I could hold my wife again. Then the email came. No subject line, no explanation. Just the cold weight of a PDF, divorce papers. By the time I opened it, she'd already drained our accounts and moved her new boyfriend into our home. My photos were off the walls, my clothes in garbage bags, my life erased. But here's what she didn't know. Long before I left for that tour, I saw it in her eyes. The distance, the silence, the second phone. While she was planning her escape, I was planning for war. And now I wasn't just a soldier. I was a man with nothing to lose. The desert was the same as always. Blistering heat. Sand so fine it worked its way into every seam of your gear, every crack of your skin. I'd been in Kandahar 4 months when the email came in. Routine check of the laptop after chow. Nothing unusual until I saw her name in the inbox. Becky. No subject line at first glance, just a preview of the first few words. Let's be adults about this. I opened it without thinking. 3 sentences. Divorce filed. Accounts closed. House occupied. By Jeremy, whoever the hell that was. Attached was a PDF, like it was a set of takeout instructions, not the end of 13 years. I read it twice, feeling strangely detached, like it was happening to someone else. Then I closed the laptop, grabbed my towel, and walked to the communal showers. The water was barely more than a trickle, lukewarm at best, but I stayed under it longer than I needed to, letting it soak through my hair, my shoulders, my boots. When I got dressed and headed to my shift, I didn't say a word to anyone. Nobody asked. Out here, silence was as good a language as any. That night, back at my bunk, I stared at the laptop screen for a long time before typing one word back. Understood. No anger, no questions, no pleading. Just that. It felt cleaner that way. Cleaner than the mess she'd made of everything. Wilson, the guy in the bunk next to me, glanced up from his book. "You good, man?" he asked, casual, not pushing. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded once and went back to reading. Military guys get it. You don't dig unless you're invited. Truth is, deep down, I wasn't even surprised. 6 months before I deployed, something had shifted. Becky stopped asking about my day, started working late at the dental office more often. Got a gym membership she barely used, new friends I never met, new passwords on her phone, little things that didn't scream affair on their own, but painted a different picture when you stood far enough back. I didn't snoop, didn't start checking her phone or showing up at her job. That's not how I was raised. My father taught me, you trust until you can't. You prepare without ever saying you did. So before I left, I made a few quiet moves, rented a storage unit across town, moved all the important stuff, documents, my mom's silver, my grandfather's watch, out of the house, opened a second bank account and tucked a piece of my paycheck away. Nothing big enough to set off alarms, just enough to make sure if the ground gave out under me, I'd still land on my feet. She thought she was ending everything with an email. What she didn't know was I was already 10 steps ahead. It didn't happen all at once. That's what people think when they hear stories like mine, like there's some big explosion, a clear moment you can point to and say, that's when everything fell apart. But real betrayal doesn't usually work like that. It creeps in slow, like a hairline crack in concrete. Tiny, harmless at first, invisible unless you're really looking. 6 months before my deployment, the first cracks started showing. Becky stopped asking when I'd be home for dinner, started saying she was tired more often. Little shifts in conversation. Shorter, sharper, less warmth, like every word cost her more than she was willing to spend. She started staying late at the dental office. At first, I believed her. Overtime, staff shortages, emergencies. But after a while, the excuses got thinner, like paper held up to the light. One Friday night, she came home after 11. Said they'd had a broken water line at work. She smelled like a bar. New clothes showed up in the closet. Nothing outrageous, just different. flashier, tighter. She signed up for a gym membership too, though she barely used it. When I asked how her sessions were going, she shrugged and said it was fine, always fine. Then there were the friends I never met. Melissa, Jenna, a few others whose names came and went like passing weather. She started spending weekends away. Girls' trips, she said. Needed time to breathe. I understood that. I really did. Deployments were hard on both sides of the ocean. But when I offered to join her for a weekend away before I shipped out, she brushed me off like it hadn't even been a serious offer. I didn't fight with her, didn't accuse her, didn't turn into the guy who demands to see your phone or follow you around town. That's not who I am. That's not who my father raised me to be. Trust until you can't. Prepare quietly when your gut starts whispering. And my gut was whispering loud. So I started moving a few pieces around the board. Got a small storage unit across town and moved the things that mattered into it. My military paperwork, the house deed, birth certificates, the watch my grandfather wore through Korea, my mom's wedding ring tucked into a velvet pouch, things Becky wouldn't think to look for or even miss. I also opened a second bank account at a credit union Becky didn't use, not to hide money, just to protect it. I set it up so a slice of each paycheck went there automatically, small enough that she wouldn't notice, big enough that if I ever needed to start over, I wouldn't be starting from zero. The night before I deployed, Becky hugged me at the airport, told me to stay safe. Her arms felt stiff around me, like she was hugging a stranger out of obligation. Her eyes were dry. I stood there after she walked away, watching the crowd swallow her up. Somewhere deep down, I knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Airports are strange places for goodbyes. Everything moves fast. Families huddled together, couples clinging for one last minute, kids crying, announcements echoing through the terminal like a countdown you can't stop. I've said goodbye in a dozen airports before, but this one felt different before it even started. Becky barely looked at me when we pulled up to the curb. She was more focused on her coffee than on me. We walked in together, silent, her heels clicking on the tile. No tears, no lingering grip on my arm. Just a glance at the check-in sign and a sigh like this was all a chore. When we got to security, she gave me a quick hug. Not tight, not full of anything. Just a routine gesture like you'd give to someone heading out on a business trip, not to a husband flying into a war zone. "Stay safe, okay?" she said. Her voice was light, flat. I pulled back and looked at her, tried to find something in her face, regret, sadness, even fear. But there was nothing, just a tight-lipped smile and dry eyes, like she was already gone. Maybe she was. "I'll call when I land," I told her. "Sure," she said, already checking her phone. I stood in the security line and watched her walk away. She didn't look back, didn't wave, just disappeared into the crowd, slipping off into some version of life that no longer had room for me. That was the moment I stopped pretending. I knew what was coming. I just didn't know when or how far she'd take it. Still, I hoped I was wrong. It's strange how even when your gut is screaming, your heart keeps whispering maybe. Maybe it's just a rough patch. Maybe she's tired. Maybe it's the stress. We'd been married 13 years. You don't throw that away over gym clothes and long hours. But the truth is, something had already shifted, long before that hug. And that final goodbye? It wasn't temporary. It wasn't, "see you later." It was the last performance in a play that had already closed. I was the only one still reading my lines. On the plane, I sat in silence. No music, no movies, just the dull hum of the engine and the weight of something I couldn't name yet pressing against my chest. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It wasn't rage either. It was the beginning of something colder, clearer. By the time I landed in Kandahar, the emotional part of me was already packing up. I had a job to do, brothers depending on me, a mission to carry out, and whatever waited back home, whatever Becky was planning, I'd be ready for it. I didn't need to guess anymore. I just had to watch. It was a Thursday. I remember because the chow hall was serving something they swore was lasagna. I was halfway through trying to convince myself otherwise when my phone buzzed. The signal out there was garbage most of the time, but every now and then, a notification would sneak through like a whisper behind enemy lines. Bank alert. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and stared. $500. Gone. Just like that. The joint account, our savings, the one we'd built slowly over the years, was stripped down to $22.37. Like a final insult. Not even enough for a gas station lunch. I blinked, reloaded the screen, thinking maybe it was a glitch. It wasn't. I set my fork down. Didn't move for a while. Just stared at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves out of guilt. Then I opened the savings tab. That one hit harder. $47,000, gone too. Everything we'd planned for, every safety net, every what-if fund, drained. Murphy, one of the younger guys in our unit, looked over. Bad news? I locked my phone and slid it into my pocket. Just some account stuff, I said. My voice sounded normal, even to me. That night, I called the bank from the base phone center. Sat in a cracked plastic chair under buzzing fluorescent lights while a woman with a tired voice on the other end walked me through my own financial collapse. Turns out the transfers had started slowly. $50 here, $200 there. Then the amounts started climbing, thousands at a time. The largest ones? The day after I left for deployment. Becky hadn't waited. She'd moved fast, surgical, like she'd planned this. I hung up and just stood in the hallway, phone dangling from my hand. Down the corridor, a couple of guys were laughing. One of them was showing pictures of his daughter's birthday party back home. His wife had made cupcakes with red, white, and blue frosting. He said she mailed him one in Tupperware. It didn't survive the trip, but he still kept it. I watched them for a while, trying to feel something. Anger, maybe. Or sadness. But I felt nothing. Like someone had hit the mute button on the part of me that reacts to things. Later that night, Wilson found me outside. I didn't hear him approach. "Heard you look like a ghost at dinner," he said, lighting a cigarette. "What's up?" I don't usually share, but Wilson once pulled me out of a mess in Kandahar I still don't talk about. I trusted him. "My wife emptied our accounts," I said. "Sent divorce papers while I was on patrol." He exhaled slow, smoke curling around his words. "What's your plan?" I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew this much. She thought I'd just roll over. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I met James at a diner about 10 miles outside of Spokane. Same guy I'd called from the desert. Same guy who answered without asking why I needed him. We slid into a booth by the window, ordered burnt coffee, and got to work. He handed me a manila folder across the table, thick, heavy. "Everything we talked about," James said, "and something you're not gonna like." I flipped it open. Bank statements, house documents, and then, near the back, a copy of a refinance application. At first glance, it looked normal enough. My name, our address. But when I looked closer, my stomach turned. The signature. It was mine. But it wasn't. The shape was close. Someone who'd seen it enough times to forge it without thinking too hard. But they missed details. My middle initial was wrong. The angle of the pen stroke didn't match. It was like seeing a photocopy of a memory. "She forged it," I said quietly, more to myself than to James. He nodded grimly. 3 months ago, right after you deployed. She pulled out $330,000 against your house, VA loan too, which makes it federal. I leaned back against the cracked leather booth, trying to process it. "That's not all," James added, pulling out another sheet. "She listed someone else as a co-applicant." I read the name out loud. Jeremy Ryan, the boyfriend. James sipped his coffee like he was trying not to spit it out. "Real winner, by the way. 2 DUIs. Fraud charge in 2019. He's the guy she moved in." I stared out the window for a long moment, watching traffic drift by like nothing in the world had changed. "She didn't just leave you," James said. "She planned it. She gambled everything. And lost," I thought. She just didn't know it yet. The gravity of it sank in slow. Forgery wasn't a slap-on-the-wrist mistake. Not when federal housing benefits were involved. Not when hundreds of thousands of dollars were at stake. "She's cooked," James said bluntly. "We've got enough to freeze the refinance, contest the sale, and open a fraud investigation. If we move fast, we can stop most of it." I closed the folder and set it down gently, like it might explode if I handled it wrong. "No screaming?" James asked. "No punching walls?" "No point," I said. "This isn't a fight you win with fists." He smiled, the kind of smile that said he was both impressed and worried. "What now?" he asked. I slid the folder back toward him. My voice was calm, cold. "Now we take back everything she thought she stole." I didn't tell Becky I was back in Spokane. Didn't tell anyone except James. It was better that way. Let them think I was still halfway across the world, tied up in sand and duty. Meanwhile, I was parked in a motel downtown, watching everything unfold from the quiet safety of my laptop. The house still looked the same on the outside. Same cracked driveway, same porch light that flickered when it got too cold. But inside, it was a different story. A stranger's truck showed up in the driveway around 9:30 in the morning. Big real estate logo plastered on the side. Daniel Spencer, realtor. The cameras caught everything. I leaned in closer, watching through the living room feed as Becky's boyfriend, Jeremy, greeted him at the door. No Becky in sight. Probably too messy to have the wife and the new guy both negotiating the sale. They moved through the house like they owned it, Spencer with a clipboard, snapping pictures of the kitchen I had renovated myself. Jeremy pointing out features like he'd built the damn place. My stomach twisted, but I kept watching. In the kitchen, Jeremy opened cabinets, showing off the new appliances, bought with deployment money, no doubt. Spencer jotted notes and laughed at something Jeremy said. Then they moved to the back deck, where I had spent whole weekends sanding and staining wood by hand. The feed caught enough of their conversation to turn my blood cold. "We'll list at $470, Spencer said, leaning against the railing. "Cash buyer already interested. Probably close for $420. Jeremy nodded like it was nothing, like all of it was theirs to sell. "What about the husband?" Spencer asked. Jeremy shrugged. "She says he's giving her trouble, but he's active duty, deployed for months. He'll cave. They always do." I sat back in the motel chair, staring at the screen. They were counting on me being thousands of miles away, helpless. Counting on me giving up because it was easier than fighting. They didn't realize I'd been preparing for this since the day she stopped asking how my day was. They didn't realize the house was still legally mine, that the paperwork, the VA loan, the mortgage, all tied to me and me alone. I checked the time. 30 minutes since they first walked in. They were taking their sweet time gutting my life. I pulled out my phone and opened the cloud app linked to the cameras. Every feed was being recorded, every word backed up. Evidence, in high definition. I forwarded the clips to James with one word. "Happening." He responded in less than a minute. "Got it. Sit tight." I closed the laptop and sat back in the chair, feeling something settle deep inside me. A weight, but not a heavy one. More like armor. They thought they were moving the pieces. They didn't realize the board was already mine. The trap didn't spring all at once. It built slowly, like a storm rolling over the horizon, too far away to hear but close enough to taste. 30 minutes after I sent James the footage, the first black SUVs pulled into the neighborhood. No sirens, no shouting. Just clean, efficient movement. Men and women in jackets stepping out, their faces calm, their badges flashing in the morning sun. I sat low in my car down the street, heart steady, watching. Inside the house, Spencer and Jeremy were still talking, still walking through what they thought was an easy payday. The security feed showed them laughing in the living room when the doorbell rang. Spencer went to answer it, clipboard still in his hand. The moment the door swung open, everything changed. Federal agents poured inside. Spencer barely had time to react before he was turned around and cuffed. Jeremy stood frozen in the middle of the room, mouth open like a man who just realized he was standing in the middle of a minefield. One of the agents read Spencer his rights, while another slipped a heavy hand onto Jeremy's shoulder and let him out. My phone buzzed in my pocket. James. "They've got them," he said. "FBI is locking it down." Through the windshield, I watched as Becky's boyfriend was marched down the front steps of my house in handcuffs. His head hung low, that cocky smirk finally wiped clean. A few minutes later, a white sedan screeched up the street. Becky. She jumped out before the car even fully stopped, running toward the house like she could undo everything if she just moved fast enough. Agents intercepted her on the lawn, blocking her from the front door. She stood there, hands over her mouth, staring as the agents carried boxes of documents and electronics out into the driveway. Everything she thought she had hidden was being laid bare for the world to see. My phone buzzed again, Agent Patel this time. "Got them on tape," she said. "Discussing the fraud, the sale, the conspiracy. We've got everything we need." "And Becky?" I asked. "She's distressed, claiming she didn't know what was happening." I watched her from my car. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She just stood there, frozen, like someone who just realized the ground she was standing on had never been solid in the first place. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "That depends," Patel said. "On what she knew, and on what you want." I stayed there a while after the SUVs pulled away, after the neighbors went back inside pretending they hadn't been standing behind their curtains. Watching Becky pace the lawn. Watching the house sit there, stripped bare of all its lies. For the first time since the email hit my inbox in Kandahar, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in months. Not anger, not sadness. Closure. The paperwork came through 6 months to the day after Becky's email hit my inbox. No-fault divorce. Clean break. It almost made me laugh how neat it looked on paper, like the last year hadn't been a war of its own. I sat at a battered kitchen table in my rental apartment, pen in hand, flipping through the final documents. Becky had signed her half already. Her signature was smaller now, almost delicate, like she knew the weight behind every letter. Part of me wondered if she even read what she was signing, or if she just wanted it over. She gave up any claim to the house, forfeited any right to my military pension, agreed to full restitution for the money she took. In exchange, I didn't press charges against her personally. No prison time, no court battles that would drag out for years. It wasn't mercy. It was strategy. I didn't need revenge dragging behind me for the rest of my life like a chain. When I finally pressed the pen to the last line and set it down, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, like dragging yourself out of a burning building barefoot, clothes singed, lungs full of smoke, and realizing you're still breathing. The truth of what Becky had done would probably never make full sense. How much she knew about the scam Jeremy had been running. Whether she'd been part of it from the start, or whether she'd just fallen for the wrong person at the worst time. It didn't matter anymore. The pieces were scattered too far to ever put the story back together cleanly. Sometimes the why doesn't matter. Sometimes all you're left with is the wreckage. James called later that night. "It's official," he said. "You're free." "Doesn't feel like freedom," I told him. "Maybe not yet," he said. "But it will." The FBI case against Jeremy and Spencer moved fast. Both took plea deals, spilling everything they knew in exchange for lighter sentences. Jeremy got 8 years. Spencer got 12. More names came out, more schemes unraveled, more military families saved from losing everything. Agent Patel said my case had helped them crack the pattern wide open. It didn't erase what happened, but it mattered. One afternoon, weeks after signing the divorce papers, I drove by the old house. It sat empty now, for sale sign ripped down, grass growing tall in the yard. Like it was holding its breath, waiting for someone new to start over. I didn't get out of the truck, just sat there for a few minutes, remembering the life we tried to build inside those walls. Birthdays, anniversaries, late-night talks on the back deck, and somewhere along the way, a silence that swallowed everything whole. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel much of anything. It was over, and that was enough. A year later, I didn't think much about the house anymore, or about Becky, or Jeremy, or any of the wreckage they left behind. Some things burn so hot and so fast that all you're left with is empty space. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need to start over. I sold the house through a private buyer, took the proceeds and did something I hadn't done in years, made a decision just for me. I found a small cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 10 acres, a creek running behind the property, no neighbors for miles, just trees, wind, and sky. The cabin needed work. Plumbing that rattled when it was cold, floors that creaked like an old ship, a roof that sighed every time it rained. But it was mine. Every nail, every worn board, every scratch on the windowsill, mine. I got a German Shepherd, a rescue dog named Scout. Big paws, bigger heart. He followed me everywhere, watching every move like he couldn't quite believe I wasn't going to disappear on him too. We spent the first few months learning each other's rhythms. Long walks by the creek, quiet evenings on the porch. A lot of silence, but the good kind this time. I officially retired from the Army not long after the move. 20 years in. Enough. I didn't leave bitter. I left proud. Proud of what I gave, proud of what I survived, proud that I still had something left in me to build with. Carpentry filled the quiet hours. Repair jobs for local folks. Fences, porches, the odd furniture piece when winter got too heavy. Nothing fancy. Just honest work. Work that left you tired in the right ways, not the hollow kind of tired that eats you from the inside out. Sometimes at night I'd sit out on the porch, Scout at my feet, and think about how close I came to losing everything. Not just money or property, but the part of me that still believed in good days, in new starts, in enough. One afternoon I got a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was Navy. They'd almost been taken by the same scam that caught Becky. The FBI had given her my name. She wrote, "You don't know me, but because of you, we still have our home. Thank you for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away." I pinned that letter to the fridge. It wasn't revenge that built this new life. It wasn't anger that kept me moving forward. It was something quieter, something steadier. Not every battle looks the same. Some you fight with fists, some with paperwork, some just by standing your ground when everything else tells you to run. I didn't save the marriage. I didn't get the life I thought I'd have. I got something better. I got peace.